Hello everybody and welcome back again to Let's Play Assassin's Creed Unity. Alright, I think we are slowly approaching the end of this DLC. At least we finally have the key, which probably means that I now have to go back to the log, because for some reason we thought it was a clever idea to look for the log first and then get the key. But okay, let's just continue. Also, can I pick up that thing over here? It's a little bit too high, apparently. Well, that's weird. How would I get up here? I have no idea. But then again, I don't really collect these anyway, so I'm just going to leave it here. Anyway, yeah, we have to get out of this place first. So, let's do that. And I'm going to assume that's maybe like Napoleon's little hideout. At least that would make sense. We still have some people around here, but maybe I can just run past them without getting into conflict. Well, this is actually not the way where I have to go. Now let's just finish off this guy. I'm actually not entirely sure where I have to go. Let's try to follow the map. Okay, this is something where we can go. Oh, and if more people. And I don't really care. Just leave me alone.
Will be killed on sight.
And even more of them. Oh boy. Let's just run straight towards the exit here. And apparently it is actually the exit, so that's good. Oh, we have more people on the outside.
I'll fit you.
Quite a few people, actually. But I think I should be able to make an escape over here. Alright. I think I'm fine. There we go. And we're done with this memory. And yes, I missed the headshots, but I didn't really try to get them. Which means now I have to continue with the next memory. So I guess I probably have to go back to the cathedral and into the crypt. And back to the lock, right? It's not actually on my map, but it's somewhere underground, right? Either way, it's going to take a while until I get there, so I'll bring you back once I've arrived. Alright, I'm finally back at our mysterious door, so I should be able to open this now with my key. Let's hope the key fits. Memory 6, a crown of thorns. Let's do it.
Now for that artifact.
Allow me.
Oh no. Ah no.
What skill stealing the key?
But not skilled enough to see these people. Overwhelmed in a cutscene again.
The commandant. Tell him that I resign.
So apparently he's trying to do this on his own now.
What now?
Well, how about we try to get out of here and back up again?
To light your way.
Oh,
Leon, how did you find me?
I know. what I'm doing. All of France is counting on you.
Mm-hmm.
Little man, thank you. Now get out of sight, I mean it.
Why?
It's time to find out what's inside that temple.
And the Capitaine?
He shall fall! For I am an assassin.
Well, really. Glad you realize that. Anyway, what did he just... Oh, it's the lantern. Funny, I lost my lantern when I fell down here. But yeah, I knew that he was going to show up again. Because they wouldn't set up this character and then just, you know, not have him show up again in this game other than small scenes. Right, so... Gotta get out of here. Oh, I see. We have some animals on here, like insects. But I do not have any oil in my lantern, so I need to find a way to refill it. No, let's look around a bit. I think I can see a jar on my map over here. Yep. There's one right here. I'm very grateful to whatever person put all the jars down here in the catacombs. Okay, obviously now I have to go back without actually spoiling the oil. So I can't get into the water, but this over here should work. Alright. And now I should be able to climb up here, right? Yep. I should maybe not use it the entire time to preserve my oil. Okay, got another plate over here. Okay. And another one over here, but not going through here. So, do I have to go up here? I mean, this wall certainly doesn't look like I can climb it. Or any of the other walls for that matter. But yeah, we have something going on over here. So I'm guessing that's the way to go. Okay. So I hope you're going to jump over here. Yep, you do. But apparently that water was enough to spoil the oil. I mean, we have more oil down here, but that's not really where I have to go. I'm guessing that I have to go through the window over here because I think I'm seeing another jar, but no, that's significantly further away. But let's see what's going on in this room. Okay, now we can open this. And I guess now I can retrieve some oil and go back the way that I came, but not entirely sure what to do with that oil then. But sure, let's fill up the lantern again. Not going to need it at the moment. Let's go all the way back. Right, now going to need the light for this one. Okay, so now what? I can't go this way because that's going to spoil my lantern. I can go through here now. I'm not sure. I might be able to just climb up this way again. Okay. And now we can go up here. Okay, yeah, and going to need my light again, so good thing that I refilled the oil. Now I can extinguish it again. Oh, that's quite a lot of beds. Anyway, I think I found the temple and now I need to assassinate Rose. Where exactly is he? Somewhere down here. Yep. I'm guessing precursor architecture. Oh well, let's just go in and kill the people. I feel I will have to do this at some point anyway. Let's start by killing a bunch of the leaders. Alright. Yep, you just leave. I'm not interested in any of you. I just want to kill this one guy over here. Oh, he's actually somewhere inside here. Okay, apparently I just needed to reach this spot to trigger a cutscene.
The
Fair
devil
enough.
do I get it? Open, damn you!
Well, this looks unusual.
The artifact will never be yours.
So apparently that's the mysterious artifact I've been looking for. Alright. And now I just have to kill Captain Rose. So I still may want to take care of all his henchmen here because they're going to disrupt my attacks and they are easier to kill for now. So let's just get rid of them one by one. And then we can be with the captain. I'm going to assume that he's a little bit tougher than the rest of these normal raiders. And he's also very difficult to carry, apparently. Alright, I think now we can fully focus on him. Well, actually, he's not really that much harder. Oh, but he has lots of reinforcements. Maybe I'm just going to use one of my bombs here to make it a little bit easier for me. Well, I'm almost done with him, so I may want to focus on him after all. There we go. That wasn't so difficult.
The artillery required to break this siege.
Steal the artifact, and your reward shall be far greater than anything Commandant Bonaparte has got.
Where do I deliver it?
To the Lady Eve.
The Lady Eve. Okay. Oh no, we have another puzzle to solve. Great. But apparently all of his henchmen have just vanished. That's fine with me. So, let's see, what exactly are we looking at here? Got a number of braziers. So, let's bring out the lamp. Okay, there are symbols on the floor. And I'm guessing they are supposed to be numbers because they have like a different amount of strokes. Meaning this one over here is 1, 2, 3 and 4 strokes. Is it really that easy? Ah no, I think this over here is going to be my code. So it's 2, 4, 3, 1. 2, 4, 3, and 1.
Vive la France!
And there we go. Well, I gotta say the precursors didn't really have the best password safety. They basically put password to the door right next to the door. Not very clever. Okay. Now that we got rid of these guys, let's check out the artifact. Well, can't actually get inside here. Oh, I have to go up. Well, let's see. What would be the best way to do this? Can I just climb up these walls? I mean, they look vaguely climbable. There we go. So, let's see. Yeah, I still need to go higher. And there we go. Oh, did the mechanism that I just activate move the artifact all the way to the top? I thought it would open the door, but I guess that works too. Let's retrieve it.
Now, old friend, we shall see why they're after you.
It's a weird glowy mask. I think that's more than enough. Head of Saint Denis. It's the head of a saint. Okay. Hold E to charge this ancient relic. Release the button to unleash the power of Saint Denis. So it's kind of like the Apple of Eden, just in the form of a head. Well, sure. So that's going to be interesting. Yep. It is very similar to the Apple of Eden. But this should make my escape significantly easier. So I'll take it.
What dark magic is this? That commandant.
Alright. But I gotta be careful, because if they attack me while I charge, it's going to disrupt the charging progress. How about you just leave? Don't you see what kind of powerful magic I'm wielding here? Do you really want to fight with me now? Just take a hint. Take a hint and leave me alone. I also like how these bats seem to be following me around now. I'm going the right way, I hope. Just up back the stairs over here. Also, I can't run, that's why I'm walking. Okay, there we go. I made it. And then he just left.
Ah, dear Arno. Our hopes as to the future condition of the human species may be reduced to 3 points.
Napoleon Bonaparte.
Oh,
You are
that
under
is like an
arrest
apple
for
of Eden
treason
inside.
and deserting your post.
The destruction of inequality between different nations. The progress of equality in one and the same nation.
Final passengers!
This must reach Al Mualim in Cairo.
Ha!
And lastly, the real improvement of man.
Al Mualim, I thought he was dead for quite some time. So it must be a different one, I suppose. But okay, apparently we made it to the end of the game. And since this episode is not very long, I guess I'm just going to include my usual verdict video right within this video. So I'm going to take a quick break and then I will start recording my verdict video because I have a number of thoughts on the game. So yeah, stay tuned for my opinion. Alright, I am back. I just took a quick break to think about what I want to say here. And I have a number of things to say. Specifically, I have a few issues with the story because on the one hand, I think they had a number of really interesting ideas. However, then they kind of chose the least original one as the focus of the main story, which essentially was another revenge story for like the third time in the series. But I will talk about some of their more interesting ideas later. As usual, before I do that, let's talk a little bit about the technical aspects of the game, like the gameplay and the design. And I don't really have much to say in that regard because most of it was fine. I already mentioned very early in the game that everything in this game looked really gorgeous. It was colorful and it was shiny and it was very, very lively. I mean, there was so much stuff going on. It was really quite incredible. Sometimes overwhelmingly so, but I am really impressed with how busy the game was and all the people and all the stuff going on all the time. It took me a while to get used to it. You know, all these random events that just kept popping up. They were a little bit confusing at first, but after a while you get used to it. And in that regard, I am, really quite impressed by how the game looked like and how real it felt to, walk through Paris and see all the turmoil and all the chaos going on. So that is definitely something that I will give a big thumbs up in this game. It looked great. As for the gameplay itself, like the combat, that was fine. I mean, they changed it a little bit compared to previous games. I don't really have any issues with the way the combat was in this game. The free running and parkouring was okay. It looked really good. I mean, Arno really made it look easy, but sometimes it was a little bit wonky because Arno has very sticky fingers, so to speak, because he likes to stick to stuff. Once you get too close to a wall, he wants to climb it, and sometimes he doesn't want to get down and stuff like that. It kind of reminded me of a toy that I had as a child, which was like a spider made from some sticky rubber, and you could like throw it against the wall and it would just stick to the wall. That's kind of how it felt playing this game sometimes, because I think if you throw Arno against a wall, he's going to stick as well. So it looked pretty good, and most of the time it worked fairly well, but sometimes, there was some wonkiness here. But overall, I'm fine with the combat and the parkouring. So again, that gets a thumbs up from me. Don't really have much to say about the rest. I mean, we had some new aspects, like we could customize a character a lot more than before. And we had all these different weapons that we could pick up, and, all of that is fine. I don't have any issues with that. So I'd say we are just going to move to the more interesting part, which is the story. And, like I said, I have some issues with the story because for all their great ideas, they kind of didn't use the full potential of these ideas. And I'm going to explain, what I mean by that later. First, maybe let's talk a little bit about the setting of the game. Now, after Assassin's Creed 3, this is basically the second game that is set with a background of a huge historical event. So we had the American Revolution and now the French Revolution. Obviously, all the other games had real historical events going on as well, but they were not these huge history-changing events that you would still learn about in school centuries later. It was just, various stuff going on in the background, but nothing was like really super important. And you may remember in my verdict video of Assassin's Creed 3 that I felt that the real historical conflict really overshadowed the Assassins and Templars conflict. That was one of my main points of criticism of Assassin's Creed 3, that the whole Assassins Templar aspect felt very tacked on to the story. It didn't really seem to fit, and sometimes you weren't really sure exactly what was going on between the Templars and Assassins, because all the focus was on the actual real historical conflict. And I would say they actually managed to do it better in this game, because the main story was very much focused on the Templars and Assassins conflict, and the French Revolution was almost like background noise that occasionally would play a role in the story, but it certainly wasn't the focus. So I feel that they did it a lot better this time. Maybe they actually, had the same kind of criticism of Assassin's Creed 3, that they realized, okay, maybe we focus too much on the real history and too much on our own story, so we want to do it differently this time. So they basically improved that. I would even say that maybe they went a little bit too far into the other direction now, because, like I said, the conflict of the French Revolution was basically background noise, to a point where it almost felt like a distraction whenever it actually interfered with our main plot. And we had a lot of, famous personalities in the main story, but they were almost like cameos that didn't really have much consequence in the long run. I mean, Napoleon showed up for one mission and then he was gone again. And then for some reason, which I'm still not entirely sure, he showed up at the very end again. And well, in the DLC as well. But honestly, his role wasn't really of any deeper consequence. I mean, anyone could have played that role for all we know. Or, Robespierre, who is arguably one of the most famous names of the French Revolution overall, he just showed up in the very last mission for, a very short amount of time, and then he was gone again. And even Marquis de Sade, I mean, he at least showed up more than once, so he was integrated a bit better into the story, and he did show up in some of the Paris stories as well. Now, to be fair, I didn't play all of the Paris stories, so I can't really judge if, some of the important personalities show up in those stories as well. But just looking at the main story, the famous characters in the main stories almost felt a little bit like name dropping. Okay, we gotta include some of these famous persons in the story. But compared to previous famous persons, they were not quite as well integrated into the story. I mean, if you look at Leonardo or Machiavelli or Blackbeard or even George Washington, I feel that they were, integrated a lot better into the plot of the Assassin's Templar story. And yeah, in this game, they focused a lot on the Templar Assassin story, and like I said, maybe they went a little bit too far into this direction now. But I still prefer it over how they handled it in Assassin's Creed 3. So if they can't really balance these two different stories that are basically competing with each other, then I think it's better if they go for the Templar Assassins aspect. But yeah, that's what I wanted to say about the setting. It was interesting to look at, but sometimes it was pushed maybe a little bit too much into the background. Now, let's talk about some of the ideas that I thought were really interesting in the story, but they kind of fizzled out a little bit. They were basically relegated to minor plot points. For example, we had the Assassin's Templars truth, which was basically the premise, or one of the premises of the game, that there was a truth between Templars and Assassins, which seems fairly unique, because I don't think this ever happened before. And considering how unusual this is, the game, for most of, the first half of the game, treated this truth with astonishing casualness. So it was barely ever discussed, I'm not entirely sure why they made this truth. I did read a little bit in the codex entries, and apparently Mirabeau and De La Serre just kind of liked each other, or at least they respected each other, and, unprecedented times, so that they decided to, have a truth. But the game itself never really dwelled too much on this truth. It just happened to be there, and everyone was just like, yeah, well, there's a truth now, no big deal. Except it kind of is, because, they have been fighting each other for centuries, the Templars and Assassins, and just a few decades earlier, the Templars basically annihilated the entire American branch of the Assassins. And even in the face of the goddamn apocalypse, the Templars and Assassins wouldn't call a truce. If you think back of Assassin's Creed 3, I think Desmond actually, suggested that, while we're trying to save the world from, this solar flare or whatever, wouldn't it make sense to, not fight each other? Which is actually pretty reasonable. I would even argue it's also very reasonable in that situation to not just make a truce, but to work together to an extent and, pool resources to prevent this catastrophe from happening. But no, even in that situation, they would still keep fighting each other. So I feel like I need more explanation on why Mirabeau and De La Serre wanted to make this truce now. Especially since it happened fairly early in the timeline of the revolution, even before the Bastille. So surely there have been other times of chaos and turmoil, and still there was no truce. So again, it was really an interesting idea, but they really didn't do much with it, because in the end I was still killing Templars and so on. So I was kind of glad that we at least had this subplot with Belek, who apparently was rather unhappy about this truth, to a point where he killed Mirabeau, because that was the only time when this whole, plot point with the truth actually seemed to have any consequences. And Belek's anger about this truth, with these people that, he saw killing dozens of innocent people, seemed pretty genuine, and from his perspective, certainly understandable. I would even say that the confrontation with Belek was one of the best moments of the game, so I feel that there was a lot more potential for conflict and drama and story in this idea of having a truth. But after we killed Belek, the fact that this truth ever existed was really of no consequence anymore. Like I said, it wasn't really of much consequence before either. So, yeah, I don't know. It was a very intriguing idea, but they didn't really do much with it. Instead, we had another revenge story. To be fair, they put a little bit of a twist on it, because Arno was basically taking revenge for his adoptive father, who was a Templar. His real father, the assassin, that didn't really seem to play much of a role here, because that was so long ago, and Shay probably isn't even alive anymore at this point. So he was basically trying to take revenge for De La Serre. But the fact that De La Serre was a Templar, again, didn't really seem to have any consequences for the story, because Arno didn't even know that he was a Templar or that Templars existed. So I think, again, there is an interesting story here, but it wasn't Arno's story. As a matter of fact, it would have been Elise's story, because Elise was raised to be a Templar. She was initiated as a Templar, I believe, and then the Templars essentially betrayed her and wanted to kill her, and she was forced to work with the Assassins. Again, what an interesting idea, but we didn't get to see Elise's story. We basically just saw Arno's story for the most part. And Elise's story, well, she barely appeared in the first part of the game, and then we had that one scene where Arno brought her to the council, and yes, people were hostile towards her, and she insinuated that they might blame her for Mirabeau's death. But after that, again, this whole conflict and this whole idea just died down, and the fact that Elise was raised as a Templar didn't really play any role anymore, and she could have as well been an assassin at that point because, she was working with Arno and no big deal. So again, a really interesting idea, but kind of wasted the potential here by just going with Arno's story because, yes, he was taking revenge for a Templar, but it didn't really have any consequences. So again, that's another idea that I thought was really interesting, but not used the way they could have. Or just the idea of having a love story between a Templar and assassin seems like the potential for a very interesting story. I mean, there could have been some kind of dramatic star-crossed romance because, they love each other, but they have to fight for different ideas or whatever. Didn't really do much with that either because, like I said, at some point, the fact that Elise was a Templar didn't really seem to matter anymore. She was still working with Arno. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they thought that this star-crossed romance would have been a little bit too much of a cliche, and I guess it is a bit of a cliche, but at least it would have been something different, not just another revenge story. So, as you can see, I feel that there were a bunch of really intriguing ideas, and somehow they decided not to do much with them. And I mean, the whole point of, having a story is to create some kind of conflict. For example, the conflict between, the Templar, Elise, and the assassin Arno. But whenever they had the potential for such a conflict, the one with the truth as well, they basically got rid of the conflict basically within one mission. And that's kind of sad because they could have done more with all of this. So, yeah, I mean, the story wasn't bad, but like I said, it was also not very original because, again, they just went for, the old story of revenge. And it could have been so much more. Also, one thing that I would have liked to see in the story would have been a few flashbacks, specifically flashbacks of Arno and Elise. Because on more than one occasion, they spoke about how they did this when they were kids and how great their childhood was and how well they worked together and stuff like that. And honestly, I kind of would have liked to see that. Because you're probably familiar with the concept of show, don't tell. So the game wanted to convey the fact that, Arno and Elise work well together and they really like and love each other and so on. But they could have shown us via flashbacks instead of just having them tell us that they, work well together. Kind of like you had in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where you had Edward as a fairly, established character already. So we had flashbacks to establish his past. And I think they could have done the same for Arno in this situation, because again, they introduced him as, a grown-up character. And he very quickly became an assassin, and I'm completely fine with that because we have seen the whole, origin process before more than once. So the fact that they sped up, the first part of the game a little bit and quickly had him go to the assassins is actually completely fine with me. But a few flashbacks to establish his past and his relationship with Elise certainly would have helped because honestly, I think I didn't really feel as much for this relationship than I should have, because Elise was an interesting character. I thought Arno was, a decent character. So I wasn't really that much engaged with this relationship than I should have been, I think. And yeah, speaking of Arno as a character, maybe a few words on that as well. He actually started off pretty interesting, but again, I feel that they wasted some potential here because they didn't really develop his character all that much for most of the game. And they kind of fell into this whole, our protagonist has to be a rebel trap, which they basically have with more or less every character. For some characters it's not quite as obvious because they do not have to work within a hierarchy. But usually when you have like an assassin, he kind of has to work within a hierarchy because that's how they set up the lore and the world building. You know, the Assassin's Order is an order with some kind of hierarchy. But they always seem to pick characters who have really, you know, problems with following that. In case of Ezio, for example, this wasn't a problem because there was no real hierarchy for him. I mean, he had allies, but he didn't really have superiors as such, so he could do what he wanted without having to report to anyone. It wasn't a problem for Edward, because for most of the game he was basically, you know, you could say a freelancer. He wasn't specifically working for the Assassin's hierarchy. But it basically occurred for all the other characters. I think Altair is probably the prime example of that, and for him it actually made kind of sense because he never really chose to be an assassin and to be within that hierarchy. It did kind of happen with Connor. Of course, the only quote-unquote hierarchy in his case was Achilles, and again he clashed with him for some time at least. It also happened with Shay, not just with the assassins, but he always appeared to have, you know, some problem with the Templar hierarchy. At least some comments from Haytham seem to indicate that. So, again, whenever Arno was interacting with the council, he seemed like really passive-aggressive and always had a snarky comment, even if the situation was entirely innocuous, you know. And sometimes I just wondered myself, Arno, do you really want to be here? Because you don't really seem like you want to be here. Do you really want to be an assassin? Now, I do understand what they're trying to do here. They want to present a character who isn't just blindly following orders. And that's fine. I can completely respect that. But they have to be a little bit more particular about that. They have to choose their battles. For example, if I may compare this to one of my favorite series, which is Star Trek. You know, I grew up with Star Trek The Next Generation. And again, we have an organization here that has a hierarchical structure. And people are expected to follow orders. Nevertheless, on occasion, a character will disobey an order, usually because he has some earnest objections. And when this happens, it's treated as a pretty big deal. You know, for example, Captain Picard would on very few occasions disobey an order because he just felt that the order is wrong. And when this happened, it was usually a very special and impactful scene. It would not have been special and impactful if Captain Picard would basically disobey orders every time, or at least be like openly resentful of every order a superior gave him. And that's kind of what happened with Arno here. He seemed like a rebel without a cause. He just seemed to be obstinate without any specific reason. And if you think about it, we had that one mission where he chose to stay with Elise instead of going after Germain. And I think this should have been a very dramatic and important scene. You know, he decides to stay with a person that he loves instead of working for the assassin's interests. But at that point, you know, he has been disobeying orders left and right and always has been very unruly in general. So that was pretty par for the course at that point, right? It wasn't unexpected or unusual or any kind of special. It was pretty obvious what he would do at that moment, so it wasn't any kind of character development either. So again, that could have been handled differently. You know, if you put your assassin in a hierarchy, then maybe you should at least have him work within that hierarchy most of the time so that when he does disobey an order, it's actually something special. And this could have been a moment where this could have happened. And again, it didn't. You know, it was just, of course he would do that. Because why should he start following orders now all of a sudden? So yeah, I don't know. He started off pretty strong, but then for most of the game, he didn't really seem to get any kind of character development until the very end, because, as I mentioned, I actually liked his little monologue at the end, because that actually seemed to indicate some character growth. But that basically happened off camera between, you know, Elise's death and whenever that final scene happened. So, yeah, I don't know. I kind of liked the story, but at the same time, it felt underwhelming because there were so much more interesting stories going on that were just, going on in the background and then just vanished and disappeared. So I feel they could have done a whole lot of more with the story than they did. And maybe for the next game, don't go for another revenge story. Surely you have proven with this game that you have more interesting ideas than that. Just, go for them and don't, stay in these same safe waters the entire time. Anyway, there are a few other things that I want to talk about. For example, we had the side content, which was quite a lot. As a matter of fact, it was so much I didn't get to finish it, even though I would say that I dedicated maybe half of my Let's Play to side content. I will say this, however, I did for the most part enjoy the side content, specifically the Paris stories, while the tasks themselves were obviously, the same kind of stuff that you always do, assassinate, steal, and so on. They actually had some fairly interesting stories going on, usually in several parts. So I didn't mind doing these Paris stories because I thought they were actually pretty interesting. Just a little bit too many of them because I didn't get to finish them at all. I also enjoyed the murder mysteries, maybe again a bit too many of them and maybe a bit too long. It took 20 minutes to finish one of them. But at least it's something new, some new idea that they implemented in this game. And I mean, the rest of the side activities were just the usual stuff, so nothing special to mention here. And I guess I should also talk a little bit about the present day story, such as it is. And it isn't really much. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I mean, on the one hand, I feel they should, at some point progress that whole present day story with Juno and so on. But then again, the time to really continue with that story was 2 games ago. And it has been stagnating basically since the end of Assassin's Creed 3. And the present day activities that you had in Black Flag and Rogue were definitely not my favorite kind. So I am kind of glad they got rid of it. And this present day story is essentially just a framing device at this point. There wasn't really a story going on at all. It was just a device to explain why we're inside the Animus. And that's about it. And like I said, since they haven't done anything with the story for 3 games now, I kind of lost interest in it. And I'm fine with the fact that they reduced it to basically nothing. We had these server bridges, which were kind of interesting. Seeing Paris in different timelines. Sure, why not? I didn't mind the fact that they were included, even though they weren't very interesting gameplay-wise. They were certainly nice to look at. And I also feel that the DLC was apparently supposed to set something up here. I mean, Arno mentioned Al-Mualim at the end, which, unless Al-Mualim is a time traveler, is probably not the same person from Assassin's Creed 1. And someone called Lady Eve was mentioned, so I suppose this person is going to play a role maybe in the next game. I don't know. I feel that the DLC didn't really give us a lot of new information, but I guess it's supposed to be a setup for something to come in a later game. And this later game is going to be Syndicate, but as usual, I will play one other game in between, because after one game of Assassin's Creed, I kind of have to, do something else. And this something else is going to be Detroit Become Human. And this will actually start a little bit later. Let me have a quick look at my calendar here. I'm really busy at the moment, so I'm going to take 2 days off in between games this time instead of just 1. So this episode is going to upload on Tuesday, which means Thursday and Saturday is going to be a day off. And on Monday, we're going to start the next game, which is going to be Detroit Become Human. But yeah, I'm glad that you have been watching my Let's Play of Unity. Overall, I would maybe rate this at about the same level that I rated Assassin's Creed 3. I know it was enjoyable enough, but it has some issues, and it had the potential to be a lot more than it was. But either way, I'm looking forward to the next installment of Assassin's Creed. Within a few weeks, probably, because Detroit Become Human is not a long game. So I hope you're looking forward to that as well. But for now, I'm just going to say thank you for watching as usual, and see you again next time.